It was still early in the morning when Miguel entered the large glass doors of the tall office building. The sun had only just risen, and the city streets were slowly filling with people rushing to work. For most of them, it was the start of another ordinary day. But for Miguel, every day felt like both a challenge and a blessing. He had learned to live quietly, without expecting much, and he carried his broom and mop with the same quiet dignity that he carried his life. Miguel worked as a janitor in one of the biggest companies in the city. The building was tall, modern, and always busy, filled with people in expensive suits, holding coffee cups and talking about deals and meetings. Most of them walked past him without a glance. To them, he was just the janitor. But Miguel never allowed himself to feel less than anyone. Work was work, and he knew the value of every honest job. That morning, the building was still quiet. Miguel enjoyed those moments before the offices filled up. He liked the sound of his mop gliding across the shiny floor, the smell of soap, and the calm silence that wrapped around him. For those few hours, he didn't feel invisible. He felt useful. He was the one who made the place shine before anyone else stepped in. As he worked near the lobby, he noticed a young woman sitting on one of the benches by the window. She had a gentle face, though she looked tired, as if life had placed many weights on her shoulders. Beside her sat a little girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with curly hair and bright, curious eyes. The girl swung her legs back and forth, humming to herself. Miguel smiled faintly as he passed by. Children had a way of softening his heart. They reminded him of his own son, who was staying with relatives in another town. He missed him dearly but worked here to save enough money for a better future. The little girl noticed Miguel and tilted her head, studying him carefully. She had the innocent boldness only children possess, the kind that made them speak their minds without fear. "Hi," she said cheerfully, her small voice echoing slightly in the empty lobby. Miguel stopped for a moment, resting his mop against the bucket. He smiled kindly. "Hello there." The girl's mother looked up quickly, a bit embarrassed. "Sweetheart, don't disturb him. He's working." But Miguel shook his head softly. "It's no bother," he said, his voice warm. He had always enjoyed talking to children. They never judged, never pretended. The girl leaned forward, her eyes wide with innocent curiosity. She studied his simple uniform, the gloves on his hands, and the tired lines on his face. And then, out of nowhere, she asked the question that would change everything. "Are you my new daddy?" The words landed in the air like a sudden drop of water on still glass. For a moment, everything felt frozen. Miguel blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. He looked at the little girl, who waited patiently for his answer, her small hands folded in her lap. Her mother gasped softly, her face turning pale. "Oh no, sweetheart, that's not. You don't just ask people things like that." She reached to hush her daughter, but the child only looked back at Miguel with the same hopeful eyes. Miguel's lips parted, but no sound came out. He had been asked many questions in his life, but never this one. His heart skipped a beat, and an ache rose in his chest, the kind of ache only memories could bring. For a second, he thought of his own son calling him Papa years ago. That sweet, tender voice that he hadn't heard in far too long. The lobby door opened with a soft chime. A tall man in a dark suit entered, walking briskly, his polished shoes tapping against the floor. He was the CEO of the company, Mr. Anderson, a figure everyone respected and feared. He was known for his sharp mind and cold efficiency, the kind of leader who built empires but rarely smiled. He paused when he noticed the scene before him, a janitor standing speechless, a little girl staring up at him with innocent hope, and a young mother looking flustered. Miguel glanced at the CEO and then back at the child. He didn't know what to say. If he said no, he might break her little heart. If he said yes, he might confuse her even more. His silence spoke louder than words. The little girl's question seemed to echo in everyone's minds, heavy and unforgettable. Even the CEO, a man used to numbers and strategies, found himself unable to simply walk past. He stopped a few feet away, his sharp eyes softening just slightly as he looked at the child. The mother quickly stood, pulling her daughter close. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, embarrassed. She doesn't understand, but the girl, still clinging to Miguel with her eyes, spoke again. "You look kind. That's why I thought maybe." Her small voice trembled, but it was filled with honesty. Miguel felt his throat tighten. He wanted to comfort her, to say something gentle, but all he could do was stand there, holding his mop like it was the only thing keeping him steady. For the first time in a long while, Miguel felt truly seen. Not as a janitor. Not as a man cleaning floors. But as a human being, someone a little girl believed could be a protector, a father, maybe even a hero. The CEO finally cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Is everything all right here?" His voice was calm, but there was a hint of something else in it, something less cold than usual. The mother nodded quickly, still flustered. "Yes, sir. Everything's fine. My daughter just said something she shouldn't have." But Miguel knew it wasn't something she shouldn't have said. It was something she needed to say. And though he still hadn't found the words, he understood the weight of her question. In that moment, three very different lives brushed against each other in a way none of them expected: a janitor who carried quiet grief, a little girl searching for love, and a powerful CEO whose past was more tangled than it appeared. The day had only just begun, yet it already felt like something important had been set in motion. Something that could not be ignored. Miguel picked up his mop again, his hands trembling slightly. He gave the little girl a gentle smile, the kind that spoke without words. The girl smiled back, as if she understood. And though no one could explain why, the air in the lobby no longer felt empty. It felt heavy with possibility. The rest of the morning passed, but Miguel could not get the little girl's question out of his head. "Are you my new daddy?" It had been such a small voice, soft and sweet, yet it carried a weight heavier than any broom, mop, or bucket he had ever lifted. He tried to push the memory aside while he continued cleaning the hallways and restrooms, but no matter how hard he worked, the words echoed in his heart. Miguel had always been a man of few words. He was not used to talking much, especially at work. Most of the people in the building rarely spoke to him anyway. They were busy people, climbing ladders of success, while he stayed on the ground floor, scrubbing and sweeping. But the little girl had spoken to him in a way that felt different. She had not looked at him like the janitor. She had looked at him like someone important. Someone who could matter. When Miguel took his lunch break, he sat outside the building on a small bench near the back entrance. The sun was warmer now, and the city buzzed with life. Cars rushed by, people hurried down sidewalks, and the smell of food from a nearby cafe drifted in the air. Miguel opened his small lunch box. Inside was a sandwich he had made the night before and a small apple. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him going. As he ate, his thoughts drifted to his past. His life had not always been this way. Once, he had been a husband and a father living in a small but happy home. He remembered the laughter of his wife, Rosa, and the way she used to hum while cooking dinner. He remembered the joy of holding his newborn son for the first time, feeling the tiny heartbeat against his chest. For a while, life had been full of love, even if money was scarce. But happiness had been fragile, like glass. One rainy evening, everything shattered. Rosa was on her way home when a terrible accident took her life. Miguel had rushed to the hospital, praying it wasn't true, but the moment he saw the doctors shake their heads, his world fell apart. From that day forward, Miguel's life changed forever. He tried to stay strong for his son, little Daniel, who was only 4 at the time. But grief was a heavy shadow that followed him everywhere. He worked harder, taking any job he could find, just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. He washed dishes, carried boxes, painted walls, whatever was available. Eventually, the opportunity came to work as a janitor in the tall corporate building. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Miguel took it without hesitation. The pay wasn't enough to support Daniel fully, so he made the difficult decision to let his sister, who lived in another town, take care of the boy for a while. She promised to look after him like her own child. Miguel promised himself it would only be temporary. But weeks turned into months, and months into years. Miguel sent money every month, and he called whenever he could. Yet each time he hung up the phone, the silence in his small apartment felt unbearable. The hardest part was missing the milestones: Daniel's first day of school, his birthdays, the little moments that made up a childhood. Miguel often carried a photo of his son in his wallet. On lonely days, he would take it out and look at the boy's smile, reminding himself why he was enduring this life. "For you," he would whisper. "All of this is for you." That morning, when the little girl in the lobby asked if he was her new daddy, it touched something deep inside him. It reminded him of Daniel. It reminded him of what it felt like to be needed. To be called father. And though he didn't show it on his face, inside, Miguel's heart had cracked open. Later that afternoon, while cleaning one of the conference rooms, Miguel paused by the large windows. From there, he could see the city stretched out like an endless sea of glass and steel. So many people with their own lives, their own stories. He wondered what the little girl's story was. Why would she ask such a question to a stranger? What had she been through to even imagine he could be her father? He remembered the way her mother looked tired, almost as if she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. He knew that look. It was the same look he saw in the mirror every day. Perhaps that was why the little girl's words had pierced him so deeply. Miguel thought about approaching them again, maybe to say something kind to the child. But he hesitated. People in this building often looked down on him. They saw only his uniform, not the man wearing it. What if the mother thought he was overstepping? What if the CEO, who had been standing right there, thought he was trying to get involved in matters that weren't his business? The janitor shook his head and forced himself back to work. But even as he swept the floor and wiped the tables, he couldn't shake the feeling that fate had placed that little girl in his path for a reason. When his shift ended, Miguel walked home slowly. The streets were busy, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of Daniel again, wondering what he was doing at that very moment. Maybe he was playing soccer with his cousins. Maybe he was reading a school book. Or maybe he was lying awake at night, missing his father. Miguel wished he could be there. He wished he could hear his son call him Papa again. But life had forced him into a role where he had to sacrifice closeness today for the hope of a better tomorrow. That night, as he sat in his small apartment, he opened his wallet and looked at the photo again. Daniel was smiling, missing one of his front teeth, his eyes bright and full of life. Miguel closed his eyes and let the memory wash over him. The little girl's voice echoed in his head once more, "Are you my new daddy?" The question wasn't really about him. It was about her. About a child's need for love, for safety, for someone to call their own. And yet, somehow, it had touched Miguel in the deepest part of his soul. For the first time in a long while, he felt something stir within him, something close to hope. Mr. Anderson, the CEO of the towering company, had always been a man who believed in control. His office on the top floor was like a world of its own, filled with polished furniture, glass walls, and shelves lined with awards and photographs from business events. Everything about him was sharp: the crease of his suits, the firmness in his voice, the way he carried himself like a man who had never lost a battle. But what most people didn't know was that behind the polished surface, there were cracks he never let anyone see. That morning in the lobby had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He had walked in, expecting just another day of meetings, phone calls, and negotiations. Yet instead, he had witnessed a moment that pierced right through the armor he wore every day. A janitor, standing speechless. A little girl, looking up with innocent hope. A question so simple, yet so heavy, "Are you my new daddy?" And then there was Emily. Mr. Anderson had not expected to see her that morning either. She worked in the company as a secretary, quiet and efficient, never drawing much attention to herself. But for him, Emily was not just another employee. She was part of his past, a part he had tried to bury but never truly escaped. Years ago, before he became the powerful CEO everyone respected, he had been just another ambitious man trying to climb the corporate ladder. Back then, he and Emily had crossed paths in ways no one else knew about. They had shared conversations after long work hours, quiet dinners, and dreams about what life could be. For a brief moment, they had even shared something more, something fragile and unspoken, but real. But ambition had its price. Mr. Anderson had made choices that pulled him away from her. He chased success with relentless focus, believing that once he made it, everything else would fall into place. In the process, he let go of people who mattered. Emily was one of them. And now, years later, seeing her again with a daughter by her side stirred something in him he hadn't felt in a long time. All day, during meetings and presentations, his mind kept wandering back to the lobby. He remembered the look on Emily's face, the way she tried to hush her daughter, her embarrassment, her worry. He remembered the little girl's wide eyes and trembling voice. And he remembered Miguel, the janitor, standing frozen, as though the question had cut through him as well. Why had the child asked such a thing? What had her life been like for her to look at a stranger and imagine he could be her father? That night, long after most of the employees had gone home, Mr. Anderson remained in his office. He loosened his tie, sat back in his leather chair, and stared out at the city lights. From up here, the world seemed so small, yet he felt the weight of it pressing down on him. On his desk was a single photograph. Unlike the others' awards, handshakes, buildings, it was personal. It was of Emily, taken years ago when the company had hosted a charity event. She had been standing near the edge of the room, wearing a simple dress, her smile soft but unforgettable. He kept that photo hidden under papers, where no one could see it. Yet tonight, he pulled it out and held it in his hands. Memories rushed back. He remembered the sound of her laughter, the way she listened when he spoke about his dreams. He remembered how she once told him that ambition was fine, but love was what gave life meaning. He had smiled then, brushing it off, thinking love could wait. Now, sitting alone in his grand office, he wondered if she had been right all along. The next morning, when he walked through the lobby again, he found himself searching for them, Emily and her daughter. He saw employees rushing in, the security guards greeting each other, the janitors finishing their morning rounds. And there, near the corner, was Miguel, quietly mopping the floor, his expression thoughtful. Mr. Anderson paused. For the first time, he looked at Miguel properly, not as just the janitor, but as a man. A man who, for reasons he didn't yet understand, had been pulled into a moment that seemed to involve them all. He walked past without a word, but inside, questions stirred. Did Miguel remind the little girl of something? Or was it simply the kindness in his eyes? Anderson had always believed power and wealth were what people admired most. Yet that little girl had not looked at him, the CEO, with hope. She had looked at the janitor. Later that day, fate brought him face to face with Emily in the elevator. She was holding a folder close to her chest, her eyes lowered, clearly hoping the ride would be quick. Anderson cleared his throat, unsure how to begin. "It's been a long time," he said softly. Emily hesitated before nodding. "Yes. A very long time." There was silence between them, filled with years of things unsaid. Finally, Anderson spoke again. "Your daughter, she's beautiful." Emily's eyes softened, but her voice carried both pride and pain. "She's my world." He wanted to ask more. He wanted to know if the girl was happy, if she was safe, if she had everything she needed. He wanted to ask about the father, about why the little girl would ask such a heartbreaking question to a stranger. But he couldn't. Not yet. When the elevator doors opened, Emily gave him a polite smile and stepped out quickly, leaving him standing there alone. That night, Anderson sat in his office again, unable to focus on his work. For years, he had built walls around himself, protecting his heart from distraction. But now, a simple question from a child had cracked those walls wide open. "Are you my new daddy?" The words echoed in his mind. Not because they were directed at him, but because of what they revealed, that somewhere, in the life of a woman he once cared for, there was a little girl longing for something more. And for the first time in years, Mr. Anderson wondered if all his success, all his wealth, all his power, had truly given him what he needed, or if he had lost the most important thing along the way. The image of Emily's tired face, the little girl's hopeful eyes, and Miguel's stunned silence refused to leave him. Deep down, he knew this was not just a coincidence. It was a crossroad. And soon, he would have to face the past he had been running from. The days that followed the strange moment in the lobby seemed ordinary on the surface, yet underneath, something had changed. Miguel went about his work as he always did, sweeping floors, emptying trash bins, and polishing windows. But his heart was no longer quiet. Each time he passed through the lobby or walked by the secretary's desk where Emily sometimes worked, he felt the memory of the little girl's question pressing against him. The girl's name, he soon learned, was Lily. He discovered it one afternoon when he saw her standing beside her mother, waiting while Emily handed a file to another employee. Lily spotted Miguel and waved eagerly, her smile bright enough to make him pause. "Hi, Mr. Janitor," she called out cheerfully. A few employees nearby chuckled at her choice of words, but Miguel didn't mind. In fact, he felt a warmth inside as he bent slightly and returned the wave. "Hello, Lily," he said softly. Emily turned quickly, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You know her name?" she asked, almost as if she hadn't expected him to. Lily answered for him. "I told him," she said proudly, her little face glowing. Emily pressed her lips together, perhaps a little embarrassed, but she didn't scold her daughter this time. Instead, she gave Miguel a small nod, one that seemed to carry a silent message: "Thank you for being kind." That small exchange lit a spark. From then on, whenever Lily spotted Miguel, she would smile, wave, or sometimes even run up to tell him a small story. Once, she showed him her favorite toy, a tiny stuffed rabbit she carried in her backpack. Another time, she whispered to him about a picture she had drawn in school. Miguel always listened, his eyes gentle, never rushing her, never brushing her away. Emily often watched these moments from a distance. At first, she worried it might be inappropriate for her daughter to grow attached to someone she hardly knew. But then she noticed how Miguel always treated Lily with respect, never making promises, never overstepping, simply listening and responding with kindness. And the truth was, Lily had been lonely. Meanwhile, Mr. Anderson noticed too. From his office windows, from chance moments in the hallway, from quiet observations, he saw how Lily's face lit up whenever she saw Miguel. And though he said nothing, it stirred something complicated within him. One afternoon, as fate would have it, Miguel was repairing a light fixture near the reception desk when Lily came running through the lobby with her small shoes clicking against the shiny floor. She held up a crayon drawing proudly. "Look, Miguel. I drew this at school today," she announced. Miguel carefully set down his tools and crouched to her level. "Let me see." The drawing was simple: a house with a roof, a tree beside it, and three stick figures holding hands in front of the door. Miguel noticed the details: a woman with long hair, a little girl with curly hair, and beside them, a man. "Is this your family?" he asked gently. Lily nodded, her eyes shining. "That's me and Mommy," she said, pointing at the two figures. Then, pointing at the third one, she added softly, "That's Daddy. I don't know him very well, so I drew someone who looks kind. He's smiling." Miguel's heart squeezed in his chest. He didn't know what to say. Before he could respond, Emily appeared, her face slightly flushed as she rushed to her daughter's side. "Lily, you shouldn't bother Mr. Miguel while he's working," she said firmly. But Miguel shook his head. "It's no bother," he murmured, handing the picture back. He gave Emily a reassuring glance, one that seemed to say he understood more than words could explain. Behind them, Mr. Anderson had been walking past. He slowed, his sharp eyes falling on the crayon drawing for just a second. Something about that smiling figure Lily had imagined hit him harder than he expected. Later, in his office, Anderson found himself pacing. He couldn't concentrate on the reports in front of him. He couldn't stop thinking about that picture, about the child's innocent longing, and about how Miguel, a janitor with no wealth or power, had managed to give her a sense of comfort that he himself had never offered. That evening, Miguel walked home under the dimming streetlights. He thought of Lily's drawing the whole way, and he thought of his son, Daniel. Did Daniel also draw pictures of families? Did he ever wonder why his father wasn't there beside him every night? Miguel's steps grew heavier with each thought, but he also carried a strange sense of hope because for the first time, he felt like he might be able to make a difference in someone else's life, even if only in small moments. Over the next few weeks, the invisible thread between the three adults grew tighter. Emily found herself sometimes pausing when Miguel and Lily spoke, listening quietly to their exchanges. She noticed the way her daughter's eyes brightened, the way her laughter became fuller. She hadn't heard Lily laugh like that in a long time. At the same time, Anderson grew increasingly restless. He had spent his life making decisions quickly, cutting deals, and moving forward without hesitation. But this was different. Each time he saw Lily, guilt pressed heavier on his chest. He had been absent when Emily needed support the most. He had been absent from a child's life that perhaps, he should have been part of. One Friday afternoon, a small event was held in the building, a family day, where employees were encouraged to bring their children. The lobby filled with laughter, balloons, and little feet running across the polished floor. Miguel had been asked to help set up the decorations, and though it wasn't part of his usual duties, he did so gladly. Lily, of course, was there with Emily. She spotted Miguel hanging colorful streamers and ran over immediately. "Mr. Miguel! Come play with us," she shouted. Miguel laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'm working, Lily." But before he knew it, she had grabbed his hand and was tugging him toward the game corner where other children were tossing rings onto wooden pegs. He allowed her to lead him, his heart warming at her excitement. Emily stood nearby, watching the scene unfold. She saw how naturally her daughter trusted him, how Miguel bent down to cheer her on when she landed a ring. For a moment, Emily's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of something she couldn't yet name. Mr. Anderson stood farther back, his expression unreadable as he observed the three of them together. It was as though he were looking at a puzzle, with pieces slowly clicking into place. When the event ended and families began leaving, Miguel returned to his duties, quietly cleaning up the leftover cups and balloons. Emily approached him then, her voice soft. "Thank you," she said. Miguel looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For being kind to Lily," Emily answered. "For giving her something she's been missing." Miguel's chest tightened, but he only nodded. He didn't want to intrude on her life more than he already had. But what none of them knew was that Mr. Anderson had heard every word. And for the first time in years, the powerful CEO felt truly powerless because he realized the choices he had made long ago were no longer just his own. They had shaped a little girl's world. And now, whether he wanted to or not, his path was crossing with Miguel's, with Emily's, and with Lily's. And destiny was quietly whispering that none of their lives would ever be the same again. The days after Family Day felt different for everyone. The laughter of children had filled the office halls, leaving behind echoes of joy that lingered even after the balloons and streamers had been cleared away. But for Miguel, Emily, and Mr. Anderson, the event had done more than just brighten a Friday afternoon. It had drawn invisible lines between their lives, lines that were pulling them closer together whether they were ready for it or not. Miguel tried to continue as he always did, quietly moving from one floor to another with his mop and broom. Yet, he could not ignore the way Lily now looked for him every time she visited the office with her mother. Her small footsteps would hurry toward him, her voice would call his name, and her smile would chase away the loneliness he had carried for so long. One afternoon, as Miguel polished the brass handles of the lobby doors, he heard that small, familiar voice again. "Mr. Miguel." He turned, and there was Lily, running toward him with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Emily followed close behind, her steps slower, her eyes filled with both warmth and worry. "I drew something new," Lily said breathlessly, opening her notebook and showing him another crayon picture. This time, the house was bigger, the tree fuller, and the three stick figures were joined by a fourth, a little boy. "That's Daniel," Lily explained, though she had never met Miguel's son. "You told me you had a boy. So I added him. Now the family is bigger." Miguel froze, his chest tightening as he stared at the picture. She had remembered his words. She had made a space for his son in her imagination, as if she already accepted him as part of her little world. Emily stepped closer, her voice quiet. "Lily, sweetheart, maybe Mr. Miguel," but Miguel shook his head gently. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you, Lily." The little girl beamed, as if she had just given him the greatest gift in the world. And in a way, she had. That evening, after Lily had gone home, Miguel lingered in the lobby longer than usual. He sat on one of the benches, staring at the city lights through the tall glass windows. Emily, who had stayed late to finish some paperwork, noticed him as she walked out. "You're still here?" she asked softly. Miguel nodded. "Just thinking." Emily hesitated, then sat down beside him. For a moment, they were both silent, two tired souls sitting side by side in the quiet night. Finally, Emily spoke. "I'm sorry about what Lily said that day," she whispered. "She doesn't understand. It's just, she's never really known her father. He left before she was born. And she trailed off, her eyes glistening. "I tried to be everything for her, but sometimes I think she feels the emptiness, even if she can't explain it." Miguel listened quietly, his heart aching. "She's a good girl," he said gently. "She just wants love. Children always do." Emily looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw the quiet strength in his eyes. "You understand, don't you?" she asked softly. Miguel nodded, his thoughts drifting to Daniel. "More than you know." What neither of them realized was that Mr. Anderson had been leaving his office at that very moment. He stopped a few steps away, unseen, hearing their voices. He did not mean to listen, but their words held him there, frozen. Emily's confession, Miguel's quiet truth, it all cut into him like sharp glass. That night, Anderson could not sleep. He walked around his apartment, restless, memories crashing into him. He remembered the choices he had made years ago, choosing ambition over connection. He remembered Emily's soft smile, the way she once believed in him. And he thought of Lily, her innocent question, her hopeful drawings. The guilt was heavy, but alongside it grew something else, resolve. The next morning, the entire office buzzed with whispers. The CEO had done something unusual. He had called Miguel, the janitor, into his office. When Miguel stepped inside, he looked out of place against the expensive wood, the shining glass, and the leather chairs. He stood tall nonetheless, his hands folded respectfully in front of him. "You've been working here a long time," Anderson began, his tone formal at first. "Quietly. Honestly. People may not always notice, but I have." Miguel said nothing, unsure of why he had been called. Anderson took a deep breath. "Yesterday, I heard what you and Emily were talking about. I heard about your son. And I've seen how you've been kind to Lily, without asking for anything in return. You've given her something she has been missing, hope." Miguel shifted uncomfortably, not used to being the center of such words. "I just listened to her," he said simply. Anderson's sharp eyes softened. "Sometimes listening is more powerful than anything else." He paused, then added, "I want to help you. Not just with a better position here but with your family. You shouldn't have to choose between working and being with your son. And Lily," his voice grew quieter. "Lily deserves people around her who truly care." Miguel was stunned. "Why are you telling me this?" For a long moment, Anderson was silent. Then he finally said the words he had held inside for years. "Because Emily and Lily, they were once my responsibility too. And I failed them." The room fell quiet. Miguel stared at the powerful man in front of him, seeing not a CEO, but a human being carrying the weight of regret. Later that week, Emily learned of the meeting. Anderson had offered Miguel a new role in the company, one with better hours and pay, enough to bring Daniel to live with him again. At first, Miguel resisted, uncomfortable with the sudden change. But Anderson insisted it was not charity, but recognition of dignity long overdue. Slowly, life began to shift. Daniel came to the city, shy at first but quickly warming to Lily, who welcomed him with open arms, just as she had drawn in her picture. Emily saw her daughter laugh and play in ways she hadn't before, and she felt something inside her finally begin to heal. Anderson, though still burdened by the past, found a strange peace in watching the small family grow. He did not try to take back what was lost, but he quietly supported them, as if making amends in the only way he could. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the city in gold, Lily tugged at Miguel's hand and asked softly, "So, are you my new daddy now?" This time, Miguel didn't freeze. He knelt down, his eyes warm, and answered gently, "I will never take the place of the father you should have had, but if you want me to be here for you, I will. Always." Lily hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapping around his neck. Emily stood nearby, tears shining in her eyes, while Daniel laughed and joined them. Anderson watched from a distance, silent but smiling faintly. For the first time in years, he felt the sharp edges of regret soften. Perhaps he could not rewrite the past, but he could help shape a better future. And in that lobby where it all began, what started with one innocent question grew into something larger, a chance for healing, forgiveness, and a new family built not on wealth or status, but on kindness and love.